Oh, how many of you got priorities this week? Things you got to do? Things must be done? How many of you see the Lord as your priority this week? Okay. Well, I wrote down your schedules for this week. Y'all ready? Take notes if you want to. Monday, you are to beat around the bush, jump to conclusions, climb the walls, and wade through the morning paper. Tuesday, I want you to drag your heels, push your luck, make mountains out of molehills, and try and hit the nail on the head. Wednesday, I want you to bend over backwards, jump on the bandwagon, and run around in circles. Thursday, these are priorities that need to be done. I want you to advise the president on how to run the country. I want you to toot your own horn, pull out all the stops, and please add fuel to the fire. And Friday, I want you to open a can of worms, put your foot in your mouth, start the ball rolling, and slip off the edge. Saturday, simple, pick up the pieces from the rest of the week. Sunday, however, I want you to kneel in prayer, bow your head in thanksgiving, uplift your hands in praise, hug someone to encourage them, and pat yourself on the back for a hell of a week.
And have a hot dog.
And have a hot dog. Now, why didn't I think of that when I was writing it? That's silly, but you know what? That's about how life is most of the time. We're running this way or that way, or selling this or moving that, or getting our kids to this soccer practice or ballet or this or that or that, and we're going so many directions and so many places. We get a little grumpy and a little testy and a little wore out, and finally we say, you know, I'm ready to quit everything, throw up my hands. We start yelling at our husbands because they're a bunch of idiots anyway. You don't know why you married them. And then, of course, the husbands are saying, I can't believe I married, Medusa here. He's screaming at me. Then there's the little children that are just a pain all the time. Nothing they do is helpful in any way, shape, or form. And it usually costs you a fortune. And somehow we're Christian men and women. Let's face it, life is tough sometimes. I'm not talking about any one particular challenge. I'm just talking about making it from Monday to Sunday. Day-to-day living. And when all else fails, then the car breaks and the house catches on fire. And by the end of the week, you're ready to throw up your hands and just say, forget it. It ain't worth it. I'm tired. I'm sleeping in. We're all subject to that. That's what we have in this free country, is the freedom to go nuts and to go insane. To say it helps if you are nuts, because then you don't notice how hard life is, I think.
You don't have far to go.
Yeah, it's like Jimmy Buffett said, if we weren't all crazy, we'd all be insane. That's what was happening to young Timothy. And Paul had to sit him down for a minute and say, hold on there, cowboy. Sit down just for a minute. Let me remind you of who you are and what you've been taught. Do you believe in Jesus? Well, yeah, sort of, kind of. Well, then why aren't you trusting in Him for strength and encouragement? Why aren't you continuing to work and live and set Him as a priority? Why is the Bible no longer important to you? Why do you not study? When was the last time you had devotion? Have you given God the time of day this week? Probably not. Except maybe if you hit your hand with a hammer, then you say, Jesus Christ! That's not really praise, by the way. It is so easy in this sea, in this vortex of what we call life whipping around us, all the stuff we got to do or fail to do or got to get done, just to kind of push Jesus onto the back burner and eventually off the stove altogether. And that was happening to Timothy, one of Paul's best students. Philip Yancey was once asked, he wrote a book. Y'all familiar with Philip Yancey? Anybody ever read his work? Fabulous stuff. If you never read another book, read this one. It's called What's So Amazing About Grace by Philip Yancey. Somebody asked him once, what prompted you to write this book? It's a beautiful book about balancing everyday life with the Christian spirit. How do you balance those two? So he wrote a book called What's So Amazing About Grace, God's Grace. And they asked him once, what prompted you to write this book? And he says, my life. He says he won an award, and this award was to enable him, to afford him to go to Sri Lanka and to study for a year's time in a monastery with a bunch of Buddhist monks who were supposedly the greatest, most disciplined people on the earth. And when he got there, he was studying with these guys, and he was given a list of 212 rules that they have, that they must follow, daily rules, all the way from doing this and doing that. And he said, oh, most of them were, okay. Some of them were a little problematic, but he adapted, he adjusted to them, and he was trying to get them going until he found out that there was a few of the rules that the monks themselves weren't really keeping. For example, he said one of the rules is that you were not allowed to eat after noon each day. That from noon till midnight was a time and a period of fasting to the Lord, a separation, so to speak, from the world, and, a glory to God. So they did not eat after noon. You could eat in the morning, and you could eat a lunch before noon, but after noon to midnight, those 12 hours, you were not allowed to eat anything. Well, what they started to do was when it came to noon, they would turn, 1 minute to noon, they would turn the clock off. So it hadn't got to noon yet. And then when it got to be 1 minute to midnight, they'd turn it back on. So they could eat all afternoon and then into the evening without breaking that rule of nothing after noon. And Philip looked at that and he said, this is just nuts. Why do you have this stupid rule? How does this bring glory to God? And why are you going to such lengths to break it? Seems like you're putting more time into busting that rule than you are into worshiping God. The Jews did the same thing. The Jewish priests, they stood up in front of you guys saying, give to the church, bring in the whole tithe or God's going to clobber you. And then they would ask, well, what do you do with your money, Mr. Priest? You got a grandma and a grandpa over here that are starving to death. Why don't you take care of them? The people would ask this. And of course the priest would say, well, I would take care of them because I've got to honor my mom and dad like the Big Ten say. However, all my money I dedicated to the temple. And now that I've given it to God and dedicated it to God, it can only be used for the men in the temple. Well, isn't that convenient? I gave my money to God as He requires, but then since it's dedicated to God, it can only be used by the men of God. And, grandma and grandpa are on their own. Not allowed to eat anything, Ramon, afternoon. So at 11:59, stop your clock. Until it's, again, 11:59 at night. Then turn it on. You only have to wait a minute and you can eat again. Don't be fooled. This world has so many ways of working on us, bending us, influencing us. Oh, hey, Brandy, you've worked all week. You're tired. Last thing you got to do is get up. You got to wash your hair, and you got to get dressed, and you got to go to church and listen to Chandler's stupid stories. And, you've worked all week. You got a million things to do. Take the day off. Oh, my. What if that was your last day? Timothy was ready to scrap the whole thing, to call it quits, to abandon the Lord and His ministry. And Paul said, that's the stupidest thing you will ever do in your life. The one being who is with you forever, promised to be with you forever, promised His help, His love, His devotion, and His strength forever, you're going to walk away from in lieu of what? A bunch of stupid, petty things that this world demands? Philip Yancey came back from the year with the Buddhist monks, and he wrote probably what's his best work, in my opinion. It's called What's So Amazing About Grace? God's grace, who is with you every single moment of your life. How to balance that awareness with everyday living and make sense out of it all. Keeping God a priority while doing that which is demanded of you. How many of us have that kind of balanced life? Be honest. I would say very few to none. Very few. Because the world is all consuming. Everything. If it ain't the school, it's the job. If it ain't the job, it's the kids. If it ain't the kids, it's the blooming yard work. Always something. Paul simply reminds Timothy, first of all, remember that which you have learned and been brought up on. And second of all, continue to grow in that. You know what the biggest problem of Christianity is today? Nobody's learning anything any further. Oh yeah, you know Jesus? Sure. Do you love Jesus? Yeah. You believe in Jesus? Okay. What can you tell me about Jesus? Well, I don't know. He's a guy who walked around. Really? That's it? What can you tell me about Jesus? What did He believe in? What did He emphasize? What were His priorities? What did He do that you're not doing? Jesus took a lot of time for prayer. How many of us take a lot of time for prayer? Jesus took a lot of time for caring for one another. How many of us take a lot of time for caring for one another? Other than just your family. You know, Jesus spent a lot of time looking for opportunities to serve. How many of us do that? Jesus invested everything He had that another might be a little better off. I remember back when Leno was on the Tonight Show, it was a time when they were debating whether or not to remove the 10 Commandments from all the public schools and all the courthouses and that stuff. Remember that? And he put it to a vote, and he asked his audience, he says, how many of you want to get rid of the 10 Commandments? And the whole audience cheered. Let's get rid of them. I thought to myself, wow. Now granted, California audience, they're crazy people anyway. But the whole audience cheered to remove any remembrance or reminding of God, the presence of God. Even Leno says, well, we don't have to get rid of all of them, do we? Maybe we ought to keep the one about not killing and not stealing. Oh, so we'll pick and choose, you see. When God is convenient, I'm His boy. But really, for the most part of life, I'm going to say it. I hate to say it, but I'm going to say it. For the most of our lives, God is very inconvenient. And our lives prove that. He becomes less and less and less of a priority. And even though we may say we know God and we acknowledge Jesus and we even say we love Jesus, fact of the matter is there's nothing about us that proves we're growing in Him in any way, shape, or form. Jesus said, pray. Go into your prayer closet every day where God is waiting for you and spend time with Him. Paul says, pray without ceasing. Paul says, never cease to do good works. Get out there, look for opportunities to care, to uplift, to build, to heal, to do something for somebody other than yourself. Make that your lifestyle. Be that kind of person, that good of a person. Well, I'm a good person. Prove it. Not with some stupid law. Well, I don't drink, smoke, spit, or chew, or don't dance with women that do. Well, isn't that a nice little rule? I don't eat nothing after noon. Ain't that a nice little rule? Well, I put in $5 in the church plate today. Well, good. God can get himself a Big Mac. Not those stupid rules. The rules where God is a priority in your life, you continue to grow and learn and be amazed. You know what is one of the coolest stories I've ever read? I was given a book, the autobiography of Billy Graham, about that thick, 9 million pages. One of these days you're going to write one that's about me. Be a little bit thinner, maybe about 4 pages, big letters. In the book, Billy Graham says he got on an airplane once, just a regular old, 747 or whatever, and he's flying from L.A. to New York, and he was sitting there in regular class, and he was reading, paying attention only to himself, and there was a lady next to him, an older lady, and she had a bag with her, and in her bag she had all kinds of snacks. Well, she started, excuse me, she put down her little tray thing and started pulling out all her little snacks. She had fruit and grapes and bananas and cookies and all that stuff. And she started, hey, you want some of these? What's up? And Billy Graham said, no, that's all right. Hey, you want some of these? She had little juice boxes and stuff. This is before the TSA and all that. Billy Graham says, she just kept, you want some of these? You want some of these? And he finally took some, and she got a napkin and wiped his mouth for him and gave him a napkin, and she just fussed about him the whole time. And she had reading stuff. Hey, you want to read this? This is a great story. This old lady just waited on him and worried about him, gave him a blanket to get him warm and her pillow the whole time. And he finally asked, do you even know who I am? She says, you're the man sitting in the seat next to me. She didn't have a clue. She did not have a clue. She was sitting next to one of the best preachers and best known preachers in the world. She just knew there was a guy next to him, and she was sharing all her stuff with him, whether he wanted it or not. Billy said he never ate so much on a plane in all his life. But if he's going anywhere, he's going to take that woman with him. She was just doing what she's trained and brought up and raised to do. To be kind to one another. What's that golden rule? Shoot, I can't remember.
Do unto others.
No, that ain't it. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Love others the way you want to be loved. Make others a priority the way you want to be kind of special sometimes. And God said, go and love each other as I have loved you. Problem is, we don't know God's love for us anymore because the world has crowded him out. Most of you who know me know that I love jazz. Anybody here like jazz? I love jazz. Carol and I put that jazz on. There ain't nothing better than sitting in the back, maybe in the spot at night, dark and everything, and to have the radio on or the tape thing on, and to hear that horn just, one of those lonely horns like John Coltrane or something like that. Oh, that man can blow a horn. And to hear that wailing in the night, it's almost like a worship service sometimes. Just the quiet of the woods and the crickets. I love jazz. Dave Koz. Dave Koz is one of my favorite artists too. I like Dave Koz. He was invited, he said. He's a Christian man, by the way, a very Christian man. And he was invited to come and speak and play at a Christian college out in Texas, which he accepted. And he took a friend of his with him. His friend was another jazz guy named Kurt Whalum. I don't know if you've ever heard that name or not. But Kurt Whalum, he was a good guy, but he wasn't a Christian guy. So he went and he helped, and the two of them played some horns and some music for him. And Dave Koz spoke about how God had impacted his life at a very early age, and how he's tried to walk with the Lord. every day of his life, and how every time in his mind, every time he blows his horns, the music is meant for God but enjoyed by everybody else. Well, Kurt Whalen thought about this, went home, after that was over, went home, and he realized how lonely he was on a planet of 6.5 billion people. He says, I don't have that awareness. I don't have that friendship with God. I don't have that, peace of Christ around me. I mean, when I'm alone, I'm alone. So we went and started talking to his friend Dave Koss, and they got together and they read a little bit, they looked up a few things. He preached kind of sort of to him. They prayed a lot together, and he accepted Christ. Kurt Whalen did. Well, he went home again, the new joy in his heart, a new friendship, not with his old buddy Koss, but with the Lord. And he wrote a song, and it's an interesting song. It's called Livin' Again for the First Time. Beautiful song about how I'm living again for the first time. Spent my whole life going through the motions, trying to keep up with the agenda, making the right appointment, this gig and that gig and this gig and that gig, on the bus, on the plane, here, there, and everywhere. His whole life, he got to the point in his life where he just felt so empty. Paul writes to Timothy, have you got any idea what you are thinking of or what you're about to do? You're blowing God off, the one being on this existence that has said He'll never leave you, He'll never fail you, He'll provide for you and end you in every possible way. He'll walk with you all the days of your life, and even in death, He will be right there to hold your hand and take you home. And you're going to blow that off for a bunch of stupid rules or agendas or... What is wrong with you, Timothy? Think for a minute. Think what you're about to do. That's a good title. Living again for the first time. Set God as a priority. Take time to talk to God in prayer. Spend a little time in study or Bible study or Sunday school or something to where you can grow a little bit more each week. Oh, Tom, it's too confusing. Yeah, but you get a little bit here and a little bit there, a little bit there. You know what? Over my lifetime, and at 51 years old, somewhere in there, over my lifetime, my wife has made me tens of thousands of meals. Now, if you ask me, Tom, which one do you remember the most? Well, none of them, really. I really don't. I mean, over the years, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But what I do remember is each one took care of a need when I was hungry. Each one provided that day's energy so that I can keep moving. Each one kept me strong and able to be who I am. Each one was a priority at that time. Do I remember all of them? No, I don't. But I know at that time they were all necessary to keep this incredible 49-year-old man alive. Set Christ as a priority and study a little here, pray a little there. It's like a meal, like a meal, like a meal. Do you remember them all? No, you won't remember them all, but boy, over time you just stay strong. You stay healthy. Living again for the first time. Really, genuinely, seriously, honestly making God a priority. Do not forget that which you've learned, Timothy. Don't you do it. It'll be the worst decision you've ever made in your life. It's time to start living again for the first time. Let us pray. Father, I thank you for your word. I thank you for your promises in that word. And I pray that everyone here becomes aware of them, learns them, and lives them every day of their life. So when we're out there putting our nose to the grindstone and our shoulder to the wheel, that your love and your grace and your peace will stay a priority in our lives. And we can balance that, your grace and our work, in a beautiful harmony. And we can be the men and women of God that you intended for us to be. That we can love as you loved, to the honor and to the glory of Jesus our Christ. Help us do just that. Amen.